Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Convo Couch. A little combo quickie for you, being that the fact that we have the coronavirus out there and you're all trapped indoors. We were going to make a video, a documentary on what happened in Los Angeles as far as the Los Angeles, California primary, the Democratic primary of 2020. We are not going to talk a lot about what happened all over California. There's a lot of trickery that goes on when it comes to California. We're just going to concentrate on Los Angeles because me, Jonny Sue, Fiorella, we've been going up and down all over Los Angeles, going to meetings, reading into laws, the new laws that took place, looking at the new voting system. And we are now convinced that our elections are engineered, just like Noam Chomsky talked about. And I want to talk about in particular the first time when I realized that, this is it. This election's going to be a shit show here in Los Angeles. Why did they implement a new system? They're trying to make voting easier, but they did the exact opposite. They made it harder. And if you know anything about voting, as far as primaries or general election, the early voting and the mail-in voting, the majority of that always goes to your moderate to your conservative candidate. In this particular case, the Democratic Party had coalesced behind Joe Biden, so he was more of the neoliberal, right-wing, moderate candidate, where the progressive liberal to progressive candidate, Tulsi Gabbard, is one, but obviously she hadn't got much traction since she's been shut out and silenced. Bernie Sanders was going to get a lot of that late vote in Los Angeles, especially because of the Bernie bros who always show up last minute, and the Latino vote. The Latino vote is very important to think about because the Latino vote is strongly weighing towards Bernie Sanders. I believe because a lot of Latinos in Los Angeles are workers, and workers love Bernie Sanders because that's his whole thing. He stands up for workers. So what Alex Padilla, along with the Registrar of Los Angeles, Dean Logan, had to do was suppress those two votes, the Latino vote and the late vote. Because if you do that there, you can give Joe Biden the numbers he needs to move on. And that's what it is all about. They moved up Los Angeles early. There's almost 500 delegates here. And if Joe Biden can get out of the state above the 15% viability, then he can go on and further hang in there and maybe eventually steal the election. And if you don't believe that they're stealing these elections, then you really need to open your eyes, because we're going to explain some stuff. And throughout this whole story, this quick video, you'll learn about what they do, the tactics they use, the elites, the Democratic establishment. It's like CIA tactics, because there are election integrity activists out there always trying to catch them. So if they use 9 to 10 methods, boom, the election integrity activists will catch up on several, but the others will leak through. So that was their main thing. And they use all the tricks of the trade. And the day I noticed, and we really just accepted it, I remember when me and Johnny went out, the new system, the vote system in LA was a new touchscreen ballot marking device, BMDs, where you would insert your ballot, you would pick your selections, and it would insert out. So they opened up all these vote centers, and they promised all these other things because a lot of the election integrity activists were on top of them, including activists and running for candidate herself, Maria Estrada, who had noticed within her own district that so many people were switched from regular ballots, from regular registered Democrat to vote by mail. So when they showed up to vote that day, they were cast aside or given a provisional ballot, which is a ballot that might or might not be counted. It's not counted automatically like your regular Democratic ballot is. And believe you me, just the other day, I was up at the registrar's office over there. They wouldn't let us bring cameras in there. I was lucky to catch a hold of Jeff Klein, who I'll talk about Jeff Klein, one of the assistants to Dean Logan, who kind of sold us this whole pipe dream that the system was going to be easier. It would move people away from provisional ballots. It's going to be quicker, whatnot. But I remember the day, and getting back to that day, is when me and Jonny Tsunami went out. It was the second day of 11 days of voting leading up to Super Tuesday, which now the California Democratic primary has moved up early. And we heard on Twitter the night before that there was some noise of the one location in Panorama City that was set to be open wasn't open. Now, when I say one location, I didn't know it was only one location. We were told by Jeff Klein months ago. In fact, Fiorella asked Jeff Klein in a new voting experience meeting about, hey, you're going from 4,000 polling places to 1,000 vote centers. Shouldn't that be cause for concern? Because last time in 2016 in Los Angeles, we didn't have enough vote centers, and it was ridiculous. And also, how are you going to get the word out, and let everybody know? And then Jeff Klein, who's Dean Logan's assistant, assured us that, it might seem like we're reducing the places. That might seem like it's going to hurt, but it's actually going to be better because it's going to be 11 days to vote in all these vote centers. And we have a huge media budget, and we're going to get the word out. We're going to tell people. We're going to get mailers, radio ads, TV, do whatever. Get the word out. Any means necessary is what he said. So when we went out on that Sunday, and it was the second day of voting, they'd started on the Saturday, the day before, 11 days up. It was like February 23rd, and it was at noon. And we looked at the map on the app. They had their own lavote.net app. And this place that said in Panorama City, we knew that Panorama City, because of Twitter, there was one location that wasn't ready and set up. Well, that particular place we went to was a retirement home. And Jonny was speaking to this Latin woman and asked him, hey, have you heard about voting going on? Because it says it's out here in the map, on the app. And she had told Jonny that, hey, I heard there's voting next week. So we went on to the next spot, the very closest spot in Panorama City. Now remember, Panorama City is one of the most poorest areas in the San Fernando Valley. We go over to the next location, which is like 1.3 miles away. Hey, Boomer. 1.3 miles away, and it's a school. And my bells just started going off in my head. I was like, wait a second. How is this going to be open, an actual school? I mean, it's Sunday now. It's closed, but during the week. Isn't this going to be a problem with a bunch of voters trying to go into a school? Then Jonny looked up and he said, oh my God, Poston. I said, what, Jonny? Don't tell me that. He goes, he realized that on the map, on this app, only 23% of the locations were actually open. Now, we had to go back and do the math, but he found out only 233 of these vote centers were open 11 days, the whole 11 days leading up to the voting. Something completely different, obfuscated by Jeff Klein, the registrar's assistant, and we realized right there that it was a slow meteor just moving right to earth. And we were going to get screwed in this LA voting, because if anybody knows anything, like we said, the early voting is going to go to Joe Biden and the late voting is going to go to Bernie Sanders. And even though Fiorella asked Jeff Klein, he was confident, they had the media budget, but it didn't happen. They did not get the word out. A lot of people didn't know. And when it came time to vote on that day, the clusterfuck happened. Now, it's important to keep in mind that what the establishment and the elites do is they use multiple tactics, right? Okay? They don't just hit you with one tactic, like I said. They hit you with multiple. And the first one they always use is the registration. Because here's the thing. If you could push people towards a provisional ballot is something that's not counted right away. It has to go to further validation to be validated from a human being. Now, we saw in the room the other day, just as 2 days ago, which they've now closed down to the public because of coronavirus, thousands of provisional ballots laying around. Okay, that's why they didn't want the cameras up there. So what they do is they force you to a provisional ballot, and then they can either exclude it, throw it away, or not count it. So that was the plan. And what they do to do so is mess with your registration. And just like Dean Logan said, though, to counteract that, to get people out of provisionals, when asked by Maria Estrada, it was like, we have a new system. You can show up anytime, and they'll change your registration, and you'll be able to vote conditionally. Well, what conditional ballots are, and this is the number one method, is mess with your registration. That's why people say, check your registration, take a picture. A conditional ballot is the same as a provisional ballot. It's got to be handled by another set of eyes, human eyes, before it gets counted. And that was the tactic they used in 2016. Remember Bernie Sanders, like, we got to wait till all the votes are counted? Yeah, well, they did that where they messed with the registrations, put people into provisional ballots. And they do this, too, with a lot of Latino people, okay? And they did this with the new system. And the reason why is, like, because a lot of Latino people in LA, they're working people, they're good citizens, they don't want to cause an uproar, so they'll sometimes take that provisional ballot because the lead will tell them, hey, it will be counted. They'll be lied to. So they won't argue and they'll take that. So in a lot of these locations, these Latino locations, just like the one we talked about when we showed up, when it was a school, there was no voting going on there. You go to the actual center in Panorama City, and there's only like limited amount of machines. Now, we went to 20 different voting locations, and I can tell you, in the white, ritzy areas, tons of machines. And the poor Latino people of color areas, hardly any machines. In fact, I have an episode where we went to the late night votings in East LA in a little small hospital, and they were pushing people who would earn the right to vote with a regular Democratic ballot into a provisional ballot because the machine was getting jammed. In other words, we fucked up, our screw up, just fill out the provisional ballot, shut up, sign it, and we'll make sure it's counted. Not true. And that's the number one tactic they used. push people into provisional ballots. So they mess with that e-file. Now, here's the thing. It used to be you go to a precinct and your name is on a list, you sign, boom, you go and vote. The vote center model now is operated by the internet. And you can go to any vote center you want and vote. Problem is, they mess with that e-file roll so bad. The voter file database, they mess with it so bad. So people were going there like, we can't find you in the database, just fill out a provisional. And that's what they did. And they took that provisional and they shut up. And if they were a new voter, they're like, oh, you can vote conditional. Well, conditional is the same as a provisional. So once again, by screwing with the registration, pushing people into the pink provisional ballots, we have this all on video proof. They had stacks of these. We saw them. We couldn't bring our cameras up there because they won't let us report that to you. But by doing so, they fucking can discredit a ton of votes. A lot of votes still haven't even been counted. Okay. Number two, the number two tactic they used too as well. The lack of training for the poll workers. Now you can imagine last time it was 1 2-hour class. This one time it was a 1 8-hour class, and they were bragging about that. But this is a brand new system. As a restaurant manager, the best I've ever done was 5 days of full training, 10-hour shifts to get a restaurant open. That was the best miracle I've ever worked in my life. And I did a lot of that on a regular basis. That's what I did in the restaurant business, was open up restaurants as a trainer. They wanted you to get, and they expect you to believe that 1 8-hour shift was sufficient for a new system with new voting laws and all this new technology, all these new ways. Everything was different, okay? They did this in 2016. One of the people who showed up at the Board of Supervisors hearing just the other day said, listen, I felt like I was thrown in the middle of a pool and not taught how to swim. And that's what I experienced. Even when I was yelling at the gentleman and saying, hey, these people earned a regular Democratic ballot and you're pushing them into provisional, a lady came over and said, please, you don't understand. They're just making us work these extra hours. We don't know. We're doing the best we can. So this method of using our citizens who signed up to help work the polls doing their civic duty, Alex Padilla and Dean Logan used them as pawns on a chess match, because not only with all the lines getting clogged up with these new systems and they were pushing people to provisional ballots, they did something else. Number 3, they inserted a faulty printer mechanism. Now, they're going to say it's not faulty, but in the independent test clearly state, and this is all the whole system of the machine, and this is number 3, the mechanism, the printer. You think it's just a printer, but no, because everything relies on that printer to get a regular ballot now. What they did was they put little sticks of dynamite everywhere. So now these printers got jammed. And as they got jammed and people couldn't use them, they pushed people to ballots, to provisionals. Also, the printer getting jammed held everything up. So on voting day, when you see these lines, right? LA, you got 2 jobs, you got a babysitter, you can't afford this. These lines, and this is documented. I have it all over my Twitter. It's everywhere. 3, 4, 5, 6-hour lines. That's what he did, because once again, what's he got to do? Suppress the late vote. And that's what he did. Number 4, the reduction of polling places and the parking. Once again, 4,000 down to 1,000, and you would think there would be sufficient parking in all these places. We did our homework, ladies and gentlemen. Jonny Tsunami looked at every single spot and marked down how many parking spaces there were. He was like, there's no parking in these places. So not only do you see this big line, you drive up, there was one place in San Fernando that had 8 parking spots in a crowded mall, quarter of a mall, with 2 restaurants, okay? So they screw you that way. They disenfranchised and suppressed the late vote so much, the Bernie bro vote. And I got to tell you, to all those young people who wait in those lines, I hate the fact that the mainstream media and all the elites always blame you, say youth voter that doesn't turn out. No, not when we do that to you, what we did on that day. We didn't inform you that there was early voting. We didn't fucking get out there and make sure that those lines were sufficient and easy. And we left you stuck for 4 hours to sit there. Thank God to the pizza website that was able to take donations, buy pizza, and bring it to the people in line. It's a genius idea. But it's so funny because that started happening around 7 o'clock on that Super Tuesday. The following Super Tuesday, they were doing it early. They already had that stay in line kind of mentality out there, that pledge out there. Number 5, paperwork and cards. We said it's a new system. One of the most valuable pieces of paper was a new voter experience card, okay? I have this up on my Twitter too as well, and I think I could probably get it for you later. The new voter experience card. While you're online, you're given this card. It's a tutorial on how to use the machines. Once again, a lot of people, they're walking here. What do you mean there's new machines? We can't vote like we did last time? Literally going to their old precincts that are closed, finding the new precincts and saying, what? These voter cards weren't hardly at any of the vote centers. Just 2 out of 20 had that vote experience card, and just one place had one poll worker explaining to people that there's a more button. Okay, this is important because on that more button where the candidates are, if you don't hit that more button or you don't see the little small button down below, you won't get the list of candidates and you might just move on. So the paperwork that's supposed to be at all these precincts, these vote centers now, we're not there. I'm talking about mail-in applicants in every single language, write-in ballots, okay? They didn't have it. We went and asked every single one. Then we also asked these poll workers the new laws. They didn't know it. They didn't understand that you can now cross over from NPP to Democratic if you sign an affidavit and you get a regular ballot. But they were unsure if you can do it as a Republican or whatever. There's all these new laws. And the new law, Senate Bill 207, took place on February 13th, right before the voting started, after the majority of the poll workers were trained. Number 6, the public was not properly informed. We talked about this again. So many people did not know that there were 11 days of voting beforehand. They said they were going to get the word out. I asked Jeff Klein the other day, I said, you said you had a big media budget. What is it? He goes, I don't know. I just know it was big. You don't know what it is, but you know it's big? Come on, Jeff Klein. Please. They were just told to say this shit. They said they would get the word out. We heard some radio ads, saw a couple billboards, but we were looking for it. It was not a mass amount of information put out there. It wasn't a big campaign to let the people know that you can vote and vote early, and they did that on purpose as well, so people showed up and didn't know what was going on. 7, the chain of custody, and this is an interesting one. Now you got 11 days of voting. One of my friends who's an election integrity activist says, now they got 11 days to cheat these ballots just as much. Well, what they did every night is from these polling places, they took all the ballots that were there, took them out of the machine, took them over to the satellite location. Then when all the satellite locations got it, they took it down to Norwalk. Now, here's something interesting to think about. None of this process was documented, filmed, or talked about. In other words, the chain of custody, which states that you need more than one person, you need to have at least 2 people transporting ballots at all time, for fairness, has to be kept. We don't know how many times they broke the chain of custody. They could have broke it endlessly, and we don't know. And here comes the number part, number 8. This is the one. Listen, we can go back. We can solve all those problems. We could, I'm going to look off my list right here. Number 1, we could eliminate provisional ballots and get everybody a regular ballot. We can train the poll workers for 2 weeks so that everybody knows everything and gets the proper training. If you want that done next time, hire me because that's what I do. We could make sure all the machines don't jam, don't have a jamming mechanism whatsoever. Everything's smooth. There's no lines. We can have 4,000 polling places that do all that stuff so everybody gets the vote. Make sure all the cards are there, the paperwork, everything's there. We can properly inform the public. I'm talking get huge numbers of votes. Chain of custody always there that we make sure it's filmed, it's saw. Nobody can mess with the ballots. And then we get to this part right here, number 8, and we lose it all, ladies and gentlemen. Listen up when I say this because this is not just LA. This is around the whole country. Our publicly funded elections have proprietary software in them. I'll say it again. Our publicly funded elections, the elections you pay for, have proprietary software in them. Meaning that if we want to get a subpoena to look inside to make sure the counting mechanisms that give us our results are accurate, we can't even do it. And there's this argument between, election integrity activists who want to eliminate computers because they even believe that open source can be canceled, and people who want to kind of embrace technology and make sure that we can continue to use it. Like Joe Rogan says, I want a one-day vote online. I'm still in that camp right now. I know these people will be upset, but as long as there's a paper trail ballot backup, in other words, we use the machines, we have a paper backup, we use the blockchain technology in open source machines so we get accountability, and then we have paper ballot backup for accuracy. We have both. Now, I feel that way, and whatever you think, maybe we should eliminate, maybe we shouldn't. But at the very least, if we are going to use these machines, they have to be open source, meaning we, the public, have the source code to go in there and look and see if anything fugaziness has happened. It's a must. So this is an argument that's going to go on. It's a debate that's going to go on. But at the very least, we should have open source technology, meaning we can see what's inside. Are there other securities we have to put in place to make sure cheating still can't go on? Absolutely. I think we need to have a good auditing process as well of the people's audit on how we count these things, because there was even bullshit going on with the auditing process as well. And last but not least, the MPP status. Everybody talks about the MPP status. I call it an oldie but goodie. 30% of the registered voters in California get an NPP, which means no party preference. It's their independent way of saying, I don't want to join a party. Here's the thing. When you go as an MPP person across California, in Los Angeles, you're supposed to be able to just switch over, now easy, but you have to ask for a crossover ballot. We have poll workers say, don't switch over because they're going to give you a conditional because the water's been too muddied, and the poll workers don't even know what's going on. But you have to say, may I have a Democratic crossover ballot, please? This also affects the mail-in MPP ballots because when they're mailed to you in your MPP status, you won't have the Democratic primary on there. And if you go to vote MPP status, the Democratic primary won't be there. So a lot of people just throw their hands in the air. This tactic's been going on for a while. A lot of people have caught up to it, but it's still effective. But there's 9 ways where they can shave. And like I say, 9 ways. It's like CIA tactics. And it's really, really bad. Now, the reason why I want to talk about this too, and I'm just looking at my notes, is because I want to talk to the activists out there right now that are so strong to fight for Medicare for all. They want a Green New Deal. They want to have, they want to end the regime change wars. They want criminal justice reform. You can list the things that go on and on and on and on. But here's the thing. If we don't have election integrity, we have nothing. You can't get a Green New Deal. You cannot have Medicare for all. You can't end the regime change wars. You can't have criminal justice reform. You can't have gun control. Because if we don't have the right to choose our elected officials that will stand up for our core values, we'll never get anything. Those officials will be chosen for us, and you will get nada, bupkis. You won't get Medicare for all. You won't get a Green New Deal. This is where the fight has to start. We have to do this here right now. The Los Angeles primary was one of their key tools, the elites, the establishment, for pushing Joe Biden forward. Joe Biden didn't campaign here. He had hardly any offices. He didn't show up to either Democratic convention, okay? But yet somehow he got 25% of the vote. And right now in California, in Los Angeles specifically, there's about the same amount of votes counted now as there were in 2016. I think there's a little bit more in the most important primary of our time. And all these places like Texas, 7-hour wait for one guy, right? We spoke to our friend in Texas. New system. Michigan, new system. New Hampshire, once again, they have SIM cards in their things. We talked about it. The guy slipped. He goes, there's a SIM card. Johnny kind of just closed his eyes because you have a SIM card with closed source technology, proprietary source technology, proprietary source software, SIM card. It's a recipe for disaster. You can remotely change things. You know, Tim Canova's talked about this. It's ridiculous, but this is something we have to get control of. And only Tulsi Gabbard, Securing America Elections Act, talks about open and closed source. She's got to go further on it, but she addresses it. And her mindset of what we have to do on these elections is important. Bernie Sanders didn't call out the election rigging in 2016, and he didn't call it out now. And for people who say that Joe Biden won fair and square, they don't know what you don't know what you're talking about. He didn't win fair and square. There's no way a guy with dementia is going to win these states that Bernie Sanders won hands down. Michigan, Washington. He should have blew him away in Los Angeles. He should have came out of California with a huge lead. When I'm talking Joe Biden, if he got 13, 14%, maybe lucky. He shouldn't even reach viability. But that's the story of the Los Angeles Democratic 2020 primary. It was stolen. It was rigged. They used many methods. And we don't have a true democracy. For Pasta Jardula, Fiorella, Jonny Tsunami, all my crew, CONVO out.